Welcome back to Sunday School. This is July 5th, the lesson for July 5th, and we are going to be talking about a wife for Isaac. But first, let's do a little review. Do you remember last time we read about Abraham's test? What did God ask Abraham to do? That's right, to sacrifice his son Isaac. Abraham obeyed and took Isaac to Moriah. They didn't bring a lamb because Isaac was supposed to be the offering. This was really hard for Abraham. But we learned that Abraham believed God would provide an offering somehow. So what happened next? Abraham built an altar, and then what? Well, Abraham placed Isaac on the altar and prepared to kill him as a sacrifice. But God stopped him just in time. Did Abraham pass the test? Did he trust God? Yes. Abraham passed the test because he was willing to obey God, even though he loved his son so much. What did God provide as a substitute for Isaac? A ram. And God provided the ram for Abraham to sacrifice in place of his son. This gives us a picture of the substitute God provided for sinners. And who was that? Jesus. So today we're going to talk about one of Abraham's servants who was sent on a special mission. So we're going to flip our picture to today's picture. We have 4 pictures today. So let's find out what mission Abraham gave to his servant. We're going to start with Isaac when he was 40 years old. Now remember, God had promised that Abraham would have a lot of descendants, like grandkids and great-grandkids, but his son Isaac had no children. He didn't even have a wife. It was time for Isaac to get married. But the women who lived nearby didn't know God at all. So Abraham wanted Isaac's wife to be a relative, someone in their family who lived in the country where Abraham came from. Abraham called his faithful servant and told him to go to the country where his relatives were. He wanted his servant to find a young woman who would come back with him and marry Isaac. This was a very important mission and a huge responsibility. The servant was a little worried. What if he couldn't find a good wife for Isaac? But Abraham was sure that God would provide a wife for Isaac. Abraham believed something very important about God. He knew that God is sovereign. Can you say it with me? Sovereign. Do you remember what the word sovereign means? Well, it's one of our Bible truth questions. It means that God is in control of everything. So sovereign, again, means that God is in complete control of everything. Abraham knew God would handle this situation, and he trusted that God would keep his promise and bring a wife for Isaac so that they could start a family and have many descendants. So the servant packed up 10 strong camels with food, supplies, and gifts, and off he went. He traveled 500 miles to a place where Abraham's relatives lived. He was on a mission to find the woman who would be Isaac's wife. After traveling for days, Abraham's servant finally made his 10 camels stop and kneel down to rest for a while outside of the city where Abraham's relatives lived. What do you think he did first? Well, the servant knew that he couldn't do this job alone. He also knew that God had already chosen the right young woman to marry Isaac. So the servant began to pray. So let's read in Genesis 24 what he said in his prayer. So if you have your Bibles, you can look up Genesis, which we've been in this whole time, so you should know it's in the beginning of the Bible. And we're going to be in chapter 24. Okay, so this is a very interesting prayer. So I'm going to read Genesis 24, 13 and 14. And it says, "See, I am standing beside this spring, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. May it be that when I say to a girl, 'Please let down your jar so that I may have a drink,' and she says, 'Drink, and I'll water your camels too,' let her be the one you have chosen for your servant Isaac. By this you will know that you have shown kindness to my master." So the servant was by the well where the people would get their water every day. And it was time for the women of the town to get water and take it back to their houses. The servant knew the women would come to the well with their water pitchers, so he prayed that God would show him the right woman. She would be the one who would do something different than the others. What did he pray that the woman would do? You remember? It says to offer water to his camels when he asked for a drink. The servant would also ask the servant would ask the woman for water. And if she said, "I will also give your camels a drink," then he knew that she was the one he was looking for. The servant trusted that God knew who would come to the well, what she would say, and what she would do. Most of the women would probably want to take the time they probably wouldn't want to take the time to water 10 camels, especially for a stranger. She would have to carry her pitcher to the well, get the water, and then go back and pour it into the trough over and over again for all of his camels. And camels can drink a lot of water, and he had 10 of them. So if they were really, really thirsty camels, she would have a big job. The servant didn't know who the right girl was, so he asked God to make it clear to him by what she would do. And guess what? A young lady named Rebecca walked out to the well before the servant had finished his prayer. Rebecca was beautiful, but was she the right woman? The servant ran to her and asked her for a drink. She gave him a drink. But would she also water his 10 camels? Let's keep reading. So now we're in Genesis 24, verses 19 and 20. And it says, "After she had given him a drink, she said, 'I'll draw water for your camels too, until they have finished drinking.' So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough, ran back to the well to draw more water, and drew enough for all of his camels." Wow! So what did Rebecca say that she would do for the servant? Draw water for his camels. That's right, Rebecca did exactly what the servant had prayed for. This was no accident. Remember, God is sovereign. He was in charge of it all. The servant had to find out if she was one of Abraham's relatives. So he asked her about her parents. And sure enough, Rebecca was part of Abraham's family. Abraham was her great uncle. This was amazing. God helped the servant find the right woman for Isaac right away. What do you think the servant did next? Well, let's keep reading. The next verse tells us in Genesis 24:26. And it says, Then the man bowed down and worshiped the Lord. So what did he do? He worshiped God. And he praised God, didn't he? Why do you think he did this? Well, he did it because he was glad that God answered his prayer. God is sovereign and faithful. God didn't let him down. He was in complete control of everything that happened. God guided Abraham's servant 500 miles down to the right town, to the right woman, who did the right things, just like he had prayed she would do. And she even belonged to the right family. So Rebecca had a hard decision to make. You see, she was the one that God had chosen to be Isaac's wife. But that meant she would have to leave her family and never see them again. But she said yes. She went with the servant back to the land of Canaan to marry Isaac. And you remember who Isaac was, right? Abraham's son. So he was the man getting married. So one evening, Isaac was out in the field, and when he looked up, he saw all of the camels coming towards him. They were home. They brought someone special. Who was the special lady that came to marry Isaac? You remember her name? I just said it a few minutes ago. Rebecca. Yes, Rebecca was the one that Isaac was to marry. And he married her and he loved her. So this is a true love story that shows us how God is in control of everything. He is sovereign. Think about how God directed Abraham, the servant, and Abraham, the servant, and Rebecca, so that everything happened the way that God had planned it. God can be trusted to work all things for good to those who belong to him. Just like Abraham's servant, we can pray and trust God to lead us too. So let's take a look at our picture here. So the first picture right here shows the servant with all of his camels. And then the second picture, what does that show? The servant praying and asking God to show him the right woman for Isaac to marry. How about in the third picture? Who is in here? That would be Rebecca. And she offered to water his camels in addition to giving him water. And then what's this a picture of? That's right, she's getting married. She's wearing white and wearing a veil, and she's marrying Isaac. So I'll move that so it's a little closer so you can see. Well, I hope you enjoyed our Sunday school lesson and learned about how Isaac married Rebecca. And some fun facts about how many camels were there when the servant met her, and the process of how the servant found her and how God led him to her. So I hope you have a great week and that you trust God with all of your future plans and desires and aspirations. I know a lot of you kids are wanting to be different jobs. Maybe you want to be a policeman or a firefighter, and I just pray that you'll trust that God will lead you and he has a plan. Okay, have a great week. Bye.